Crocheter here, and welcome to another tutorial video. Today I'm going to be helping you make this lavender chamomile tea. As you can see here, it is a nice short-sleeved t-shirt that is perfect for the summer and the spring, for those nice warm weather months. So in the video I'm going to be talking to you about techniques for how to work the cables in the yoke, how to work the body, the ribbing, the button band, everything like that, as well as how to work these nice short sleeves. So stick around and I'll be happy to show you all the things that you need to know. The first thing we'll start with is the supplies. Let's go over the supplies you're going to need. So first of all, we're going to need some yarn. So what I'm using is Premier Cotton Fair yarn. This is a blend of cotton and acrylic. It is 52% cotton, 48% acrylic. It's a fine 2 size, so that's a sport weight yarn. It comes with 317 yards or 290 meters per 100 gram ball or 3.5 ounce ball. So different sizes will need a different amount of these, but you can pick these up either from the Premier online store, or you can purchase them at a local hobby shop such as Michael's. The other thing you'll need are hooks. So the primary hook you're going to be using is going to be a size E hook. So that's a 3.5 millimeter hook. This is my Furls Odyssey, and this is going to be a good one to use with the cotton because it's very smooth, and so you can be able to work in and out of those stitches without any real snags. There's also an option to go down a hook size. So this is also my Furls Odyssey, but the size D, 3.25 millimeter. So this I used for things like the button band ribbing, or not the button band ribbing, this is done in the 3.5, but in the collar ribbing and the cuff ribbing and the hemming, the hem on the bottom of the body. The other thing you're going to need are a few notions. So I've got here a needle case. So this just has all of my tapestry needles. So you'll need those for weaving in yarn ends and also attaching your buttons or toggles. Speaking of, you're going to need some buttons or some toggles. So I just picked these up at my local Michael's. These are just loops and thread, regular wooden toggles, but you can honestly use any two that you want to fit inside of the buttonholes that can attach and just look really nice for your tea. You'll also need some scissors to be able to cut any yarn you need to. And then I always show my book here that I use to keep track of rows or rounds. That way I don't have to try to keep a row tracker or do it from my head. I just, keep track of them. But whatever you use to keep track of rows, you're going to want that tool with you as well. So with all those supplies ready, let's talk about gauge. One thing I'm so sorry I forgot to add is that you are going to need stitch markers of some kind, because you will be marking stitches in the beginning of round and also at certain points where you will do increasing and decreasing. I didn't want to reshoot the entire film just for the stitch marker part, but just so you know, that is another supply you are going to need for this project. For your gauge swatch, what you're going to want to do is work a square in the main stitch. And the main stitch for this pattern is going to be the extended single crochet. I'll be showing how to do that later in the pattern, but just know that once you make your swatch, one thing I do recommend is going ahead and laundering it, especially since this is a cotton. There is that risk of shrinkage. So go ahead and wash it like you normally would the garment, and then that way you can get a very accurate reading of what the stitches are going to do. So what you then do is you would take your ruler. I'm just using like the soft tape measure here. Usually you want to use a hard ruler, but just for this purpose, it's not too bad to use. And then you line it up with the stitches. So we've got here that each post and space is going to count as one stitch, because that's the space that a single stitch will take up. So every space here I just count as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., all the way until I reach 4 inches. And notice that this kind of lines up a little bit middle. So that might be like a half stitch. And you'll want to measure in a few different places just to kind of get like a rough average. Try not to measure at the edges because those are a little warped. Once you do that, you'll then switch gears and measure the rows. So you'll see here that you can just kind of find where the bottom of one section might be, find where the next section looks like that. That's going to be 2 rows, because in crochet, the front, forward, right side and wrong side direction change the way that the stitches look. So that would be 2, 4, 6, etc. Again, all the way to 4 inches or 10 centimeters if you're metric. One of the things you'll want to do is definitely try to match gauge as best as possible, especially stitch gauge. To me, the width is very important for something like a top-down circular yoke because the pattern is built around like certain numbers of stitches. In this pattern, you can always add more rounds or more rows to add length. So if you can't perfectly match row or round gauge, definitely try to match the stitch gauge width as accurately as possible. One way to help with that is to if you have one of these handy, if not, you can always get like a little hard ruler, but I always like to figure out the wraps per inch because even though it says, you know, sport weight and it gives like the yardage and everything, sometimes it's hard to see how a yarn is going to behave until you find out exactly how wide the wraps are going to be. So a sport weight could be a range of wraps per inch. So you might have a sport weight that's slightly thicker, but it's still within the same range. So how you use one of these is that you basically just kind of drape your yarn over it, and then without any sort of stretching or warping, just kind of like figure out how it naturally wraps around. You just keep doing that and kind of like pushing them gently to the side, and then you just figure out how many times does it take to wrap the yarn all the way around a full inch. And then once you do that, you can then see what is the wraps per inch for your yarn specifically. If it's within about 1, I wouldn't even go to 2, but maybe like with 1 wrap per inch to the one used in the pattern, then you will probably be able to have a better chance of matching gauge with the same hook. If for some reason you find that you can't get a wraps per inch exactly the same, or like, you know, you're like, I still want to use this yarn, just know that if it's a thicker wrap per inch, you'll probably need to go with a smaller hook and vice versa. So this one, you would just like kind of see, like kind of squish them a little bit there. It looks like this is going to be about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-ish wraps per inch. It might be like, you know, 17 or 18, depending on like how you might wrap it. But if you're within around that range, you're probably pretty good. So the gauge for this pattern is going to be with the cotton fair yarn and the 3.5 millimeter hook in extended single crochet. It will be 19 stitches by 17 rows, makes a 4-inch square. So once you get your gauge taken care of, you are then ready to actually begin making your shirt. The construction of the lavender chamomile tea is going to be done top down, and the first thing we work on is a yoke, and the yoke is going to be split into 2 separate sets of instructions because in one set we are going to be working in rows, and then in the next set we work in rounds. So I'll show you how we do that. So what we start with is a ribbed collar that we work in rows, and we'll be working it back and forth like so. Then in the end, what we'll do is we'll start turning, and then we will join into the sides of the rows. We'll just start working our first row of single crochets, extended single crochets, etc. While we're doing that, one thing we will be creating at the ends here is the ribbing for our button band, like this, including the buttonholes on one side. And then in the middle of that, we are just creating our pattern with the cabling that's going on and everything. So you'll get like, you know, the diamonds and the little things like that. So you'll do all of that. Then that's going to be the end of yoke part 1. Yoke part 2 is going to take all of this, and then you're going to eventually turn it to where you join the button bands on top of each other. Trying to draw it to the best of my ability here. But essentially what you're going to do is join the button bands here along where they would be at the bottom. And then these top ones we just kind of leave, and then you'll just continue working in rounds like so, back and forth. And you'll be joined somewhere either in the back or along the side, whichever one you choose. I'll show you how to do that later in the video. But then once you join that, the rest of the yoke is just built out like normal, working in rounds. And then that's the end of yoke part 2. Once you're done with your yoke, you then will have to do what is called a split. So I'm just going to kind of draw our yoke here. Okay. So what will happen is you'll start somewhere, and then you're going to work around to a certain point, and then we're going to need to split for the sleeve. So we'll chain a few and skip around to the next part here. So we'll skip all of these stitches here, land right here and join, and then continue working around the back part of the body or the front part of the body. Then we'll stop at a certain point, chain and join across, skipping all these sleeve stitches, and then coming back and joining. Then eventually what will happen is we'll just build out our stitches and rows around, until we get to the end of the body, and then we will have a join as you go band here. And it's all upside down because we're working it from top down. So we're working our way upside down, but then eventually, of course, when you flip it, it'll be a normal shirt. Then eventually what will happen is we'll come back and join the sleeves. We'll do a few rounds of sleeves to keep it that nice short sleeve look, and then a small join as you go band, and then do the same thing on the other side with the other sleeve. Just make a short little sleeve with the join as you go band. Once you do that, the final step is to then go and attach your buttons or your toggles, and then weave in all your ends, and then you're done. So that's essentially a breakdown of the construction of this tee. To begin our tee, what we're going to do is go ahead and take our smaller hook. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my D hook right here and set the other one aside and take my yarn. And we're going to start by creating the ribbing that will go around the neck. So we'll go ahead and do a slip knot. And you're going to want to chain 5. And then after that, you're going to look for that second chain from the hook, and you're going to just do a single crochet and then single crochet into each chain across. So you'll have a total of 4 single crochets. What I like to do in this very last one is take the tail and wrap it around my hook and then complete my stitch. Because what that does is it just kind of cleans up that corner a bit so you don't have your knot just sticking out of the side there. So now it creates more of this nice corner right there. And after that, you're going to chain 1, turn your work. And then if you look at the top, you'll see your front loop and your back loop of each stitch. We're going to be working single crochets into the back loop only. So I'll go ahead and insert my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 to complete a single crochet. And then I'll do that in the next 3. So you should always have a total of 4 single crochet stitches in each row. And then you'll just repeat that over and over again. Chain 1, turn, single crochet in the back loop only. And you'll do that for the number of rows that your pattern for your size tells you to do. So for me, I'm just going to complete a few more off camera. So then that way I have a little bit of length to work with. And then I can show you what to do when it's time to start making the actual yoke of your sweater. All right, I've worked up my sample ribbing here, which is just like a shorter version that I'll be working here on camera for demonstration purposes. So now that I'm done with my ribbing, I'm actually going to replace my smaller hook with my size E hook. So this is what I will use for the remainder of the pattern until I need to do ribbing later again. So I'm going to go ahead and insert that into the loop. We're going to chain 1, and now we will be working into the sides of these ribbing stitches here. So the way I like to do that is I look for my grooves, which are the ones that are in between here, and then my ridges. So what I'll do is I'll be working into the thicker parts of each one, so that way I'm getting a good secure hold for my stitches. Now, the button band is going to be worked using just regular single crochet ribbing. So it's going to list in your pattern that the first 9 rows are actually going to just be regular single crochets. For my purposes here, I'm just going to do like the first 5, and then the last 5 as well are worked that way. But then the rest are worked in what's called extended single crochet. But I'll get to that once we get to that point here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll insert my hook into the thicker part of this very first side of the row. insert there, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and that will complete my first single crochet. Then in this ridge, what I'll do is I will kind of look for that thick bit right here with kind of like the legs of that single crochet, and then just insert my hook into that, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both, and that will complete my second single crochet. And then if you look in the groove here, we've got this kind of thicker part right here, and then this part with one strand over it. We want to make sure we're working into that thicker part right here. So I'll go ahead and insert my hook into that thicker part, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's my third single crochet. So I'll go ahead and do 2 more to create 5. So 1 more in the ridge. Oops. And then 1 more into this part. So that's going to be my button band for my tee. Now, the rest of the stitches until my last 5 rows are going to be worked in extended single crochet. So what I'll do is, starting with this ridge, because that would be the next one I would work in, I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, but then I'm going to yarn over and pull through just this first loop to give it a little bit of an extended height. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops on my hook. And there we go, extended single crochet. It's a little taller than my regular single crochets, which for now might seem like a little imbalanced, but it will balance out in the end once we actually get the button band going here. So I'm going to go ahead and work into my next rows, extended single crochets. So pull up a loop, pull through just the first loop, and then pull through both loops. And then just do that again, over, over, until I get to my last rows. This foundation row is always a little slower because you're having to really find and work into those side stitches. And sometimes what might be helpful is if you have a stitch marker, you can go ahead and mark where the beginning of your button band stitches need to go. So you can mark the last 9 rows and just put a stitch marker in. That way you can just keep mindlessly working across until you get to the stitch marker. That way you're not having to stop and count and make sure, okay, do I have 9 left yet or anything like that? But yeah, I'm just gonna keep going here. Okay. So I should have 5 left now for my sample. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like I went a little too far, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that one back. And if you find you've gone too far, you can, just do exactly the same thing. So now that I have 5 rows left, I'm going to go ahead and work 5 regular single crochets into those, because this will be the other side of the button band. So we've got 1 regular single crochet, then another single crochet. So we're not doing the extended ones on this one. We're just doing the regular ones. And for this last one, I really like to just kind of work it into that kind of last thick part near the corner. And do the whole putting the tail over the yarn or the hook again, just to kind of tuck it in there, make a nice clean edge. And there we go. And so what you'll have is you'll have 9 regular single crochets, a bunch of extended single crochets, and then 9 more regular single crochets at the end of row 1. In the next row, what you're going to do is just that exact same thing, but for the single crochets, you're going to work in the back loop only to create a ribbing. So I'm going to go ahead and show that here. So we'll chain 1, turn, and then in this first stitch, working in the back loop only, I'm going to single crochet like normal, just a regular single crochet, and then do that for the next, for me, it's going to be 4 stitches, but for you it'll be 8 stitches because it'll be a total of 9. I'm just doing my total of 5 here. Okay, And we'll see that when we start working these into the back loop only, the height of our ribbing is actually going to be stretchier, so it's going to be able to match the height of our extended single crochet. So that's why we're able to do that. So now in the rest of our stitches, until we get to the next ribbing part, we're just going to work under both loops like we would normally. And then we're going to do extended single crochets again. So once again, we'll yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through just the first one, and then pull through both. And then I will just do that all the way across. All right, so I should be nearing my last 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll work one more extended single here. And then in your last 9, or in my case 5, stitches, you're going to work your single crochets in the back loop only again. So we'll go ahead and work into that back loop, working just a regular single crochet, not an extended one. And we'll do that all the way until we reach the end. And then we will chain 1 and turn. Got caught there. All right, so I've reached the end, so I will chain 1 and turn. And now we're about to start working our cable patterns. So because of how long and irregular the cable patterns are, I'm not going to be able to show you every single row on this, but I am going to show you a couple of the key stitches that will be part of them. So anytime you encounter them, you'll know exactly what you need to do. So this foundation row is actually going to be worked very similarly, and it's just going to be a series of alternating V stitches and A stitches. But the first thing we have to do is we'll do our single crochets in the back loop only for our button band. And then we're going to immediately start off with a V stitch to start cable A. So our V stitch is worked by working across 3 stitches. So it's going to count for 3, but the stitches will all be worked around the same post stitch. So what we'll do is we kind of stretch this out. We can see that these stitches match up with these 3 posts that are 2 rows below. So all of our post stitches are going to be worked 2 rows below. So we're going to find that center one, and that's going to be where we work our first front post extended double crochet. All right, all a front post extended double crochet is just yarning over, going around that post stitch, so that's the front post part, yarning over and drawing up a loop. Now, in a normal double crochet, we would go ahead and complete this by drawing through 2 and drawing through 2, but to do an extended double crochet, we need to first yarn over and draw through the 1 that's right here. So that way it can stretch it up to be slightly taller to match up with these extended single crochets. Then we can go ahead and complete our double crochet by yarning over and pulling through 2, and then yarning over and pulling through 2. Didn't quite catch that, it's okay. We're going to do it a second time. So here we go. So now that I've worked that first front post stitch, because it's a V stitch, I now need to work a single crochet, an extended single crochet in between. So what I'll do is kind of tuck down here, and we'll see that the front post extended double we just made is going to have this stitch right behind it. So we're going to skip that one. And then in the next one, which will be the center stitch, we're going to work an extended single crochet. So I'll go ahead and insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 to extend it, and then yarn over, pull through 2 to complete it. Then I'm going to go back and work another front post extended double crochet around the same post we just worked around. So that way it creates that nice V. So I'm going to yarn over, find my post here, go around it, yarn over and pull up a loop. There should be 3 loops now. I'm going to extend it by first yarning over and pulling through the first loop. Then I will complete the double crochet by yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2. And if I can flatten that out here, I can see that I have a nice V formed by those 2 post stitches around that same center post. Okay, so then I'll go ahead and skip the stitch that's behind that second front post stitch, work a single crochet, sorry, an extended single crochet into the next stitch, and then work another one into the next one. And now I'm about to work my A stitch. So all your V stitches will be worked just like this. You'll go 2 rows down, find the center stitch, work a front post extended double crochet, single extended single crochet, front post extended double crochet around the same post. But the A stitch is the inverse of that, so it's going to be flipped over. So here, let's find our 3 stitches here. We've got this next stitch. The post right below that is our center stitch. So that means that the 2 stitches on either side will form the 3 that we're going to be working across. So to do the A stitch, what we're going to essentially be doing is doing a front post extended double crochet 2 together. Whew, that's a mouthful, but it's actually just pretty easy to do. So what we're going to do is find this first post that's to the right. So 2 rows down, 1 to the right. We're going to yarn over, go around that post to create the front post part, yarn over, draw up a loop. Then we're going to extend it by doing a yarn over and pull through just that first loop. Then we're going to yarn over and draw through the next 2. Now I don't want to complete this stitch yet because I want to do 2 together. So we're going to make this into a single stitch. So then what I'll do is I'll yarn over again. There's my center stitch that was next to this one. I'm going to find the post that's to the left of that. So 2 rows down, 1 to the left. And I'm going to do a front post extended double crochet around this post. So I'll insert my hook around the front, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 to extend it. Then I'll yarn over and pull through 2. And so that will leave me with 3 loops on my hook. So that's going to be from the first front post extended double, the second front post extended double, and now I'm going to complete my stitch by yarning over and working through all 3 stitches, so all 3 loops at once. When I close that up, it creates an inverse of our V stitch. So it creates this like little upside down V, or I just call it an A stitch because it's the closest that we can get here, is it looks like an A. Now, because this counts as 1 stitch, we only have to skip 1 stitch behind it, because while it was worked across these 2 rows below, the actual stitch at the top only counts for this 1. So we'll skip that 1, work 2 extended single crochets into the next 2 stitches. Okay. And then we will just repeat that for a while. So we're going to do another V stitch, another 2 extendeds, an A stitch, 2 extendeds, and then just keep doing that. And then eventually it's going to tell you to work the sleeve section. And the sleeve section is going to involve what are called arrow stitches. So I'm going to show you the arrow stitch in this next one. So the arrow stitch is going to be in 2 parts. You're going to have an arrow 1 and an arrow 2. Arrow 1 is going to be 3, trying to see if I can do it. Okay, 3 stitches that are going to be angling inward towards the center. Then on the final one, arrow 2, it's going to be 3 stitches that join at the very top, connecting those 3 that came before it. So I'll go ahead and show you what arrow 1 will look like. So what you'll do is you'll work across however many times it says in your pattern. Just say I'm going to work the 1. Then these next 3 stitches, you're going to find and see that we have these 3 posts that are right here. What you're actually going to be doing is working across 5 posts. So look for these 5. So what I'll do is I'm going to work a front post extended double crochet around every other post. So around this first one, skip this one, around the center third one, skip that one, and then around the 5th one. So I'll work a yarn over, find this one, this first one, go around it, do an extended double crochet. So we'll chain, or we'll pull through 1, then pull through 2, pull through 2. Skip the next post, work into this center post, yarn over, go around, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Then we'll skip the next post. Going around this final 5th post, we're going to yarn over, go around, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now we'll create 3 separate front post extended double crochets that are angling towards the center. So the one on the right is going to be angling leftwards. The one on the left will start angling to the right, and then the one in the center just matches up. So that's going to create our first arrow stitch. Then you'll complete the rest of the row like you did before. So you're going to follow instructions for the number of extended double crochets, and then you're going, or sorry, extended single crochets, and then you're alternating V-stitch, A-stitch pattern. And then at the very end, you're going to be right back to your button band where you're just going to work single crochets into the back loop only. So we would just do that. Okay. And reminder that with the arrow stitch, you're going to skip the number of stitches behind it. So in this case, it was 3 stitches, even though it was worked across 5 along here. The actual count is up here at 3 stitches. So we would skip the 3 stitches that are right behind there. And then we would keep working and of course get to the end, doing our single crochets in the back loop only. So I'll go ahead and work those up and then be ready for the next row. Once you're completed with your first right side row, you're then going to chain 1 and turn. And this time we are going to be doing some increasing. So row 4 is going to be the first start of increasing for every size. So you'll want to pay attention to where you're going to be placing your increases, but the actual way you increase is exactly the same. So to start with, we're going to just do our single crochets here in the back loop only. Then whenever it gets to a point where you need to increase, what you're going to do is just, instead of working 1 extended single crochet, you're just going to work 2. So every time it tells you to increase, you're just going to do an extended single crochet in a stitch, then work another extended single crochet in that same stitch, and voila, increase done. Then you'll just work however many extended singles it tells you until the next increase. And when you get to the next increase, you just put 2 extended single crochets into that same stitch. And you'll just do that all the way around until you get to the very end. Now, the other thing about row 4 is that the button band is going to have the buttonhole added to it for our top button. So what we'll need to do is, once we get to that point, we're going to need to do some chains. So I'll show you that once I get there. And once you reach the button band, you're going to have, of course, your 9 stitches. I only have my 5 here, but it's going to be, I'm just going to do a demonstration here. So what you'll do is it's going to tell you to work 3 single crochets in the back loop only. In this case, I'll just work my 1. And then it'll say to work a chain 3. So chain 3, skip 3, and then finish off with the last 3 single crochets in the back loop only. There we go. Okay. And then once you do that, that creates the space that your button or your toggle is going to be able to push through. And that should be enough space to be able to put in about a 1 inch to 1.25 inch button or toggle. If you feel you need more space, then you can always do more chains and skip more and just like figure out where it needs to be to make sure it's centered. Or you can make it smaller if you're using smaller buttons or smaller toggles, and maybe do just a chain 2. But you can test it out by just figuring out by shoving the button in between there and seeing if it fits. But if your buttonhole is the right size, we can go ahead and move on to the next step, which is just single crocheting in the back loop only until you reach the chain 3 space. And then you'll just simply work the same number of single crochets as chains in that chain space. So for my case, it's going to be 3. But if you adjusted that chain, you want to make sure you put just the amount that you adjusted for. So if you needed 4 or 5, you would put 4 or 5 in there. Then you finish out your ribbing with single crocheting in the back loop only, and then you'll just continue working the rest in pattern. Another stitch that you will encounter is the front post cluster. So the front post clusters are going to be worked around the center single crochets or the center extended single crochets between V-stitches inside of these diamond shapes that you're going to be making. So you'll first find that extended single crochet in the middle of your V-stitch. And to make your cluster, you're going to do a yarn over, go around the post of that single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 to extend it, yarn over, pull through 2. And then you're going to leave those 2 loops on the hook. Then we're going to repeat that process again around the same stitch. So we will yarn over, go around the post of that extended single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 1 to make it extended, and then pull through 2. And now we should have 3 loops on our hook. Then we will do that one more time. Yarn over, go around the post of that extended single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 to extend it, yarn over, pull through 2. And now we will have 4 loops on our hook. So those loops are the 3 loops of our 3 extended front post double crochets here. And then the 1 loop was our starting loop. Now we're going to go ahead and close our cluster by yarning over and pulling through all 4 loops on our hook. And that should create this nice kind of tall little cluster right here that nestles right in between that V-stitch. Then, because it's a post stitch, we want to make sure we skip the stitch that was behind it. So even though we worked a bunch of stitches around one, it still only counts as 1 stitch. So once we skip that one, we'll then work our front post extended singles next to it, and then just keep going until it tells us to, work like a front post extended double or whatever it tells us to do. Okay? And that's all there is to working the front post cluster. To work the arrow 2 stitch, what you're going to be doing is essentially front post extended double crocheting these 3 stitches together. So I'm going to go ahead and get to that point. So you would extended single crochet until you get to that center stitch. And your pattern will tell you how many you need to do that. Once I reach that center stitch here, okay, I'm then going to basically work 3 front post extended double crochets, but don't complete them until the very end. So I'll yarn over, go around the first post of the previous 2 rows, pull up a loop, extend it by pulling through 1, then pull through 2, but don't finish that stitch. Yarn over, go around the next post stitch here, pull up a loop, pull through 1 to extend it, and then pull through 2. Don't complete that stitch yet. Then yarn over, find my final post stitch here, go around, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 to extend it, yarn over, pull through 2, and now I should have my 4 loops on my hook. So these 3 are for each of these front post extended doubles that I didn't finish, and then this last loop is from the previous stitch that we're going to use to close this all up. So we're going to now yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook. And kind of tighten that there. And you'll now see that you have pulled those 3 post stitches together into a point to create a nice little arrow. So then, because that counts as 1 stitch, we're just going to skip 1 and then finish with extended single crochets for as many as our pattern tells us. And now that should be all you need to know to be able to do any of the arrow 1 or arrow 2 stitches on the sides of the sleeves. Once you've finished working all of the rows for yoke part 1, you're going to end on the wrong side. So that means you'll be over here on the ribbing with the button band. So I'm going to demonstrate to you what you're going to do to join these 2 sides together using my little sample here. So in the instructions to set up yoke part 2, what you first need to do is you'll chain 1, you'll turn, and then you will need to line up the button bands to make sure that the button holes are on top. So what I'll do is I'll take my other side here. I'll actually zoom out to make that a little bit easier. There we go. And then we will line up this side so that it is underneath the button holes themselves, like so. Obviously yours is going to be much wider because it will have the neck size, but for demonstration purposes, this should work. So what you'll do is you're going to join by going stitch to stitch. So what we'll do is we'll find our 9 stitches here. In my case, it's just 5. And I'm going to work through the back loop of this current row and then through the front loop of the one behind it, joining them together. And I'll be doing extended single crochets because now I'm going to be doing that all the way around the yoke from now on. So go ahead and zoom back in here. We can see now that we will go through this this back loop here. And then I will go through, make sure it's turned towards me there, okay. And then we'll find the front loop of the first stitch of the button band on the other side. So making sure that it is not twisted or anything like that. It's going around to where the right side is all on the outside here. Find there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll find the front loop of this stitch right here. Go through that one. So now my hook should be through the back loop of my current row and the front loop of the button band at the back. Yarn over, pull a loop through both of those loops. Yarn over, pull through 1 to extend. Yarn over, pull through 2. And what I would recommend is going ahead and placing a stitch marker into this very first stitch, so that way you know that this is the beginning of our round. So then what I'll do is continue for the next ones. So now I would go through the back loop of our next one, the front loop of the one behind it here. And you should be matching stitch for stitch. So you should eventually have 9 joined joined stitches here. Or in my case, it'll be 5 for my sample. 2. Go nice and slow on this process. There's no need to rush. Make sure you're matching stitch for stitch. So now I should be on my final one. So final back loop, final front loop. And now you have officially joined your yoke together at the bottom of the button band. So from now on, you no longer have to worry about doing this ribbing part. It's just done. You're just going to be working in pattern in extended single crochets and you doing the cables in the spots that it tells you to. So the next stitch I'm going to go into is going to be this next one on the current round. There's nothing that should be worked behind it because I'm not joining with anything else now at this point. So I'll go ahead and work that one. And then I would just basically work in pattern all the way around until I get back to the beginning of my round. So I'm going to go ahead and work that off camera and I will join you when I get to the back to the beginning to show you what to do to join. I'm coming around now to my last couple of stitches of the round. And now I should be back to the corner where my very first extended single crochet was worked. So as you can see, this is why it's a good idea to do a stitch marker to make sure it's nice and clear. But you can see right here, I've got the 2 legs of my extended single right there. So what you're going to do is what's called a reverse slip stitch. So what a reverse slip stitch does is it joins rounds without creating the bump or the seam as visibly as you would if you just normally slip stitched to the front, because the way that this stitches fall is that the V's on the tops will connect and look just like normal, like they do if they were normally connected. Whereas if I went through the front, it's going to pull this kind of extra loop in the front and that's going to create this ridge. So what I like to do is go ahead and go to the back. You're going to put your yarn to the front, go through the first stitch under both loops there. a little finicky, but hold on. Pull it up so it's a little bit more like a V. There we go. Okay. So now I should go through both loops. Of our stitch. Okay. So going through both loops of the stitch through the back, we're then going to hook over yarn. So what that means is instead of the yarn being over my hook, I'm going to put it under so that my hook is on top, and then just grab that yarn with my hook, carefully just pull it through. A lot of times just kind of like do a little twist to make sure. And then that pulls the yarn through the front to the back. So then that way it creates that nice little V join there. And then I just keep pulling that loop through the loop that was on my hook, and that will complete my slip stitch. And it kind of puts that more towards the back and brings these V's of these stitches more towards the front so that they look a little bit more like they actually joined normally. Then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and turn, and I don't need to do any sort of chain one. Instead, what I'll need to do is just make sure I'm only working into my stitches. So I'll go ahead and find my first stitch here, which should be this one right here. And then I'll just continue in pattern, working my extended single crochets. And there we go. And then you just keep doing that around and around. When you get to the beginning of the round, you'll go ahead and do a reverse slip stitch into this one as well to keep the V's going in that same direction. And then you'll turn and then just work in pattern again. And then that's all you need to do. Make sure you follow the increase patterns and the cable patterns that it tells you in your written instructions until you get to the end of the yoke part 2. And then once I get to the end of my yoke part 2, I will show you what to do when it comes to splitting for the sleeves and the body. Once you've spent time building out your yoke, you're going to have this nice, big, beautiful pattern. You'll have this nice little button band right here. I would definitely take some time to make sure you try this on yourself or whoever you might be making it for to make sure that the fit is the way that they would like it. It should reach just past the shoulder portion and be able to fit under the underarms with a little bit of space because we are going to be doing some underarm chains. But overall, it should still feel very comfortable and not feel too tight or too loose. Okay, so what I've done is I've gotten around to the very last few stitches of my round. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in there so you can see. Let's get that out of the way. And you should always end on an even round. So if you do need to do any sort of extension on the size, so that way it's a little bit longer, you can always feel free to do that, but just always make sure you end on a wrong side because this next part we're going to do will be on the right side. So I'm getting around here to my last one here. Then go and do my reverse slip stitch into that first stitch. There we go. All right. And then I'll go ahead and turn. And then in your pattern, it's going to tell you a number of stitches that you're going to work extended single crochets around. And then it's going to tell you to chain a number, skip, and then continue your extended single crochets on the other side. So how that's going to work is basically it's splitting you for your front part of your chest, your sleeves, and your back part of your chest. So for me, what I go ahead and I do is I count out the number that the pattern will tell me, and I'll place a stitch marker where the first stitch that I need to skip goes. So this one is going to be the very last stitch that I work an extended single crochet in, and then I'm going to do my chain and then skip the number of stitches, and my next stitch marker should be the last stitch that I skip. So then the next one I work will be this very first one. So I'll go ahead and show that to you. So I'm going to work some extended single crochets until I get to that first stitch marker where I need to start skipping. And once I get to that point, I'm going to work that off camera. Once I get to that point, I will show you what to do next. I'm now coming up to my very first stitch marker. So what I'm going to do is work into this last stitch, my final extended single crochet. Then I'm going to chain a certain number. So you'll chain whatever your pattern tells you to chain. And then I'm going to skip all of these stitches until my next stitch marker. So if you're skipping, you should make sure that you're definitely skipping this cable with the arrow stitches, because that's going to be going down the center of the sleeve, and that's what we're splitting this part for. So if this part's the part you're about to skip, you're on the right track. All right, so I'm going to go all the way over here. You may have to bend the yoke a little bit, but in either case, we should now be over here to this next stitch marker. So this next stitch marker represents the last stitch of the sleeve stitches. So I'm not going to work into that one. I'm going to work into the one right after that one. So I'm going to go into this one and work my next extended single crochet. So keeping this loop from being loose, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over and pull up our loop, and kind of just like get really close there, get nice and close so there's not this huge gap. And then I'll yarn over, pull through one, yarn over, pull through two, and there we go. I've got my first extended single crochet here, and then I'll just start working extended single crochets into every stitch around to the next stitch marker, and just repeat that process. So once you get there, you should know exactly what to do. So I'm going to go ahead and work that part off camera. And then after that, we can finish up with the splitting of the yoke. So I'm coming up now to the very end of this round. So this stitch marker was from my beginning of round. It's not one of the ones that was from the splits. Once I get here, I will go ahead and join, and then I will show you what it should now look like. Go. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just put my stitch marker in here just to keep it secure, so that way I can show you this next part. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out here. I can pull the yoke out, and when you fold it over, you'll see these underarm chains that are closing off the sleeve right here. So that's going to be the armhole where the sleeve goes through. And then you'll see the big gap here for where the body is going to be able to go through. So that's where the chest is going to be. And then over here to the right, you've got the other sleeve hole. So you'll have these underarm chains, your nice little sleeve hole. And it's actually starting to now, instead of just being this random circle, you have the makings of a shirt. So here we go. Now it's not going to lie exactly flat because we haven't washed or blocked or anything like that, but it still should roughly be the shape like this, where you've got like this nice semicircular yoke that would wrap around the shoulders, and then kind of here where the underarms are going to be. Your front should have a few more stitches than the back one because the button band added an extra 9 stitches. And plus also the sleeves are shifted to where they're about 1 stitch back. So then that way it gives a more room in the chest area, because for me at least, and I know for most people, their chest is a little bigger than the circumference around their back. So the back doesn't take as many stitches, so it lies nice and a little bit more flat against the back, and then comes out to help accommodate the room in the chest. You can also adjust this yourself if you want to. If you want to have more room in the chest or less room in the chest, you can just kind of shift the sleeves where you want them to be. while this part may not be exactly centered down the sleeve if you do that, shifting it a few stitches won't really throw it off that much. All right, so now that I've shown you that part, the next thing you're going to do is you'll work one more round, going back, of extended single crochets all the way around. And so I'm going to show you what to do once you get to these chains. It's actually pretty simple. It's just like working into a regular crochet stitch, or when you start off crocheting, you just work into a regular chain. But I'll still go ahead and show you that just to make sure you get that. And then after that, you're going to fasten off and begin your next part in a completely different part from where it is right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work off camera until I get to one of these chains, show you what to do with the chains, and then move on to the next part. All right, so I've already worked all the way across my very first underarm chain and across this part of the yoke, and I'm now to the second underarm chain. So I'm going to use this one to show you what to do when you do encounter an underarm chain. So one thing I like to do is just go ahead and leave these stitch markers that I did for the split earlier in here to remind me of where the sleeve stitches begin and end, because later it can sometimes be a bit difficult to tell where exactly those are. But also it helps us remind us where we're working, which is in the body stitches and not the sleeve stitches when we do the next part. So what I've gotten to is I have one more stitch to work on the body. So I'll go ahead and work that. And then I want to work across this chain just like I would a normal chain for single crochet. So my extended single crochets are going to go into any of these little V's. So I'll go ahead and turn it so I can see those. And depending on how big your underarm chain, whether it's 4, 6, or 8, all you have to do is just count how many V's you need and just work into those. So here I need 6. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it looks like this is going to be a V I'll work into. And, just kind of eyeball where you think it needs to go. This doesn't have to be an exact science. You can just make it fit the number of stitches that you need. And it'll look good anyway. It's all under the arm anyway. No one's going to see it. So even if it's a bit, not perfect, it's okay. So here we go. So I've got one extended single crochet here. So I need to work 5 more. So I'll work my next one into this V here. So there's 2. And then there's 3. And then 4. Okay, so it looks like I actually missed one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, hold on. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I need, well, you know what? I said before, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do another one in here. There's 5. And then there is 6. So I've worked 6 extended single crochets across my underarm chain. And now I should be back over here to where the stitches were before. So I've got this stitch that was worked into from the previous round. So this stitch that's worked into it is the next one I'm going to work into. So that's going to be right here. Make sure it's not the one with the stitch marker because that's our sleeve stitches. And we want to work the body. So we're going to work extended single crochet into that stitch. And then we'll work into the next one. And now I'm back to just working extended single crochets around like normal. So then what you'll do is you'll just work those extended single crochets all the way until you get back to the beginning of your round. And then you will connect with the reverse slip stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and work that part off camera. And then I'll show you what to do next once you have this split completed. It instructs you to go ahead and fasten off, and then you'll continue by joining into a center stitch onto the back of the shirt. However, at this point, you do actually have the option, if you really don't mind, while the reverse slip stitch does do a pretty good job of kind of hiding it, especially with the textured stitch like the extended single crochet, it can still create this kind of somewhat visible line right here. And I personally prefer not to have that just going down the very front of my shirt, especially if it's not even centered, because it is off centered because of having to deal with the button band. But if honestly, it's not even that noticeable to you, or you're like, it doesn't bother you very much, and you don't want to go through the extra hassle of having to weave in an extra yarn end, then you can honestly at this point just continue working in the round back and forth for the body and build that out without having to fasten off. That would be perfectly fine. The only thing that you'll want to make sure you do is that the stitch counts that are listed in the pattern are based on joining in the center stitch in the back. So it's going to tell you to work a certain number of stitches. And then when you do the decreasing along the sides to do the waist shaping, they're going to be in different locations from what the pattern is telling you. But all you really have to do is just find where the underarm is and just line your decreases up with these 2 center stitches, because that's exactly where they're going to go anyway. So as long as you're keeping track of that, you can go ahead and just keep working where you are now. I'm of course going to go ahead and fasten off, leaving myself enough to be able to weave in later. I'm going to pull that. And then what I'll do is go ahead and turn it over to the back. And then one way that I can find my center stitch pretty easily is actually thanks to this cabling pattern, because it's worked along these nice center areas here. And so this very middle one right here, I can just find where this last cluster was worked and just work my way down and find that I think that the center stitch is going to be this one right here. So if that's my center stitch, that's where I'm going to go ahead and join my new yarn. So I'll go ahead and pull that and create a nice little slip knot here. Pull that through. And now that I've done that, it's going to have you chain 1 to secure that. And then you're going to work into the same stitch that you just joined into. You're going to work an extended single crochet. And since this will be the first stitch of the round, I'll go ahead and mark it with my stitch marker. And then what's great about the remaining part of the body is that it's just worked entirely in extended single crochets. The only time that anything changes is when you have to do a decrease to get the waist shaping, which honestly, if you don't want to do the waist shaping and just make it a straight body and get a more relaxed fit, you can just work around and around and around and around, just extended single crochets back and forth, and then get to the length that you need. So the number of rounds that are listed in the pattern, or if you need to go longer or shorter, you can do that as well. Mess that up. Okay, so you're basically just going to work extended single crochets, and then your pattern will tell you a certain number of rounds where you're going to decrease on the sides. So I'm not on the side yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you what that'll look like. It's a pretty simple method. So all it is basically an extended single crochet 2 together. So let's say that these are the 2 stitches that I want to decrease across. So it'll tell me do a extended single crochet decrease, and then do that twice or something like that. Or it might have you do an extended single crochet decrease, just do an extended single crochet, and then do another extended single crochet decrease. Whichever way it tells you, you'll go ahead and do it the same way. You're going to insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, then insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up another loop, so you'll have 3 loops on your hook, and you've pulled 2 of them through the next 2 stitches. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops to create the extended part of the single crochet. Then yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. And what that does is it creates an extended single crochet, but it is across 2 stitches. So then if I were to do that across the next 2, pull up a loop, go to the next one, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That will decrease it from 4 stitches down to 2 stitches. So it decreases it by 2 stitches along each side. And then that's what gives it the nice tapered look, is because you're going to be getting fewer stitches until you get down to the waist. And it creates just this nice little silhouette that really naturally fits to the contours of your body. So I'm going to go ahead and just undo those because that's not where I want my decreases to be. But now that you get the idea, you should be equipped to be able to finish out the rest of your body. So I'm going to work my body up off camera and then get back to you when it's time to work the bottom ribbing. Something I wanted to note is that in the previous clip, I showed myself joining my yarn on the center stitch of the back of the yoke, but I actually did that incorrectly. I went in the wrong side, so I just want to show you how to correctly do it. So when you're lining up with this center stitch, you want to make sure that your yoke is basically upside down because you want to start working on the right side. So previously we finished on the wrong side, so you want to join where you're going to start working the right side rounds again. So that's the only thing I needed to make sure I corrected from that previous clip. When you're working the body and doing the waist shaping, which if you just want to have a straight body, then you can feel free to skip this part and just work rounds of extended single crochet until you reach the number of rounds that the pattern says to do, or whatever length you want to make it. But if you do want to do the waist shaping, the pattern instructions will tell you that you're going to lay the t-shirt out flat and then just kind of approximate where the center stitches on the sides are going to go. So I'm just going to kind of show you that process. So to do that, you're going to need 2 stitch markers. So I just grabbed 2 stitch markers here. I'll set my hook aside. And then I'm going to take my shirt here and I'm going to just kind of lay it flat. Doesn't matter if it's front or back. But when I lay it flat, I can see kind of where the natural folds are going to be. And those folds are going to be roughly centered with the underarms here. So if I can find where my underarms are, what I'm going to do is kind of locate about where the center is and just see where it folds, like so. And then where that folds, I'm just going to kind of find a stitch that's somewhere kind of in the middle there. So the stitch count for this doesn't exactly matter. So it's not going to be a perfect fit, or it's not going to be a perfect number of stitches, but it will still look really nice. So I'm just going to mark a center stitch somewhere here on this side. And then I will do the same thing over here. I'll locate the underarm and then find where is it roughly centered. So kind of fold it here and make sure that the stitches look like they're pretty lined up. So got it lined up right about there. And then I'll go ahead and mark a center stitch here. Okay, so once you do that, you have both stitches marked. So now you've got roughly where the centers of the sides are going to be. You can then pick up where you were working before on your decrease round. And you'll just work extended single crochets all the way until you get to that first stitch marker on the side. So I'm going to work these off camera. Once I get to that stitch marker, I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I'm coming up to my marked stitch. So I'm just going to work these last couple of extended single crochets. There we go. And then what you'll do is simply remove your stitch marker and you'll set it aside because you'll use it again on the next time you do a decrease round. And you just work your extended single crochet decrease. So what that means is you're going to work an extended single crochet 2 together across the next 2 stitches. So I'm just going to show you how to do that here. We're going to insert our hook, yarn over and draw up a loop. And then we'll insert into the next stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop. So we should now have 3 loops on our hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first 2. That creates the extended part of our extended single crochet. And then I'll yarn over and pull through the next 2. And that will decrease our side by 1 stitch. And this is going to be a very gradual decrease. So you're just decreasing by 1 stitch on the side each time. So you'll just decrease 2 stitches in each decrease round. And you'll do that the number of times that it tells you in the pattern. And then that should shape it down to where it's a slightly narrower waist than it is at the chest to give you that more like tapered look. All right, so then once you do that, you then just start working extended single crochets all the way around until you get to the next stitch marker on the opposite side. And then you just do the exact same thing. You remove the marker, work your extended single crochet 2 together, and then set the stitch marker aside to use in the next decrease round. You'll work around, join at the beginning, turn, and then you'll just work however many non-increase rounds you need to. So I'm going to continue working the rest of my body until I get to the very bottom, and then I will show you how to do the join as you go band. I'm coming now to the last stitch of my final round. And then I will join with my first stitch with a reverse slip stitch. And now I'll turn my work. And you should have basically the length of the shirt that you are wanting to make. This would be a good time to try it on the wearer or to measure it out and see if it's coming to the right spot. We are going to be adding a roughly 2-inch band here at the bottom. So if it's not quite as long as you want, but 2 inches would be enough, then you should be good at this point. If you do need to add more rounds though, feel free to go ahead and just add a few more rounds of the extended single crochet without any sort of decreasing or anything like that. Once you feel like it's the length that you want, then you can proceed to do this part. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the join as you go band. So this very first stitch, I'm going to leave marked just to help me remember that that's the first stitch I'm going to get around to, because as a join as you go band, what we're going to be doing is working by going chain up, and then we're going to be doing some single crochets in the back loop only, back and forth, joining along here along the sides. And the very last one we will join into will be this first marked stitch. So I just like to keep that in there. Another thing I like to do is you could continue using your 3.5 millimeter E hook, but I like a slightly tighter ribbing. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my 3.25 millimeter D hook. So that way I can just make the stitches slightly smaller so the ribbing is a little bit tighter. So go ahead and put that into my loop here. And then the pattern will tell you an amount to chain. Honestly, you just chain whatever amount you want to get the length of the ribbing that you want to. I'm going to go ahead and do 13 just so that way I can have 12 stitches in my ribbing. So I'll do 1, 2, 3. Okay. So once I have 13, I'm then going to kind of tighten up that last chain, and then I'm going to work a single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in each chain going back down. So that's just going to be regular single crochets, second chain from hook, and then one in each chain down. So that should give you a total of 12 single crochets. This first row is always a little bit slower going because you're working directly into a chain and there's not really much to grip at the moment, but it will pick up after a while, and this actually becomes kind of a meditative stitch process. I'm not going to lie, ribbing definitely takes a long time, especially on the bottom of the body of your work, but it's definitely worth it for the look. So here we go. All right, so I should now have 12 single crochets going down my chain. And then what you're going to do is you're going to join to the body 1 stitch per row. So this row we've already done. So we're going to go into this stitch and we're going to slip stitch to join the body. Well, if I can do it without splitting my yarn, that would be ideal. There we go. Oh, grab that. Okay, there we go. Let's try that again. So go ahead and go into that first row or first stitch and slip stitch. And now I'm going to be continuing by making another row. So I'm going to slip stitch into the next one so that I can get up to the next row. So then once I do that, I'm then going to turn my work. And once I turn it, I'm going to skip those 2 slip stitches along the side of the body. So I don't want to work into those. I want to start by working into this first single crochet that I did earlier. And if I need to, I can always count back and be like, okay, I know I have 12 stitches, so I can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to seeing the 12th stitch right here. In that 12th stitch, I'm just going to work like I did the neck ribbing, and I'll work in the back loop only, a single crochet, and then I will work a single crochet into the back loop of every stitch to the bottom, except the last stitch. One thing I like to do with bottom ribbing, just to give it a cleaner edge, is instead of working just through the back loop, I'll go ahead and work through both loops of that last stitch. I'll show you once I actually get there. Okay, so I've worked all the way until I have one more stitch left. So instead of working into just the back loop, I'm going to work under both loops of that final single crochet. So I'll go ahead and pull that here. There we go. And then just do a single crochet into that final one. Okay, and then what I'll do is go ahead and turn. I'm not going to do a chain one to help keep this edge nice and clean. Instead, I'm going to just work directly under both loops of that first stitch. Complete a single crochet. Once I do that, I am then going to work in the back loops all the way down again. Okay. And I have those 12 stitches, so I've already worked into that one, so I'm going to work into this next one along the body. I'm going to pull a slip stitch through, and then I'll go to the next one and pull a slip stitch through that one. And I'll turn my work, skip those 2 slip stitches, and then just repeat what I did earlier, where I'm going to work in the back loops and then work through both loops of our last stitch, turn, don't chain one, work into both loops of the first stitch and then the back loops only of the ones after that. And that creates a nice clean edge. And you'll just do that all the way around the body. And I'm going to work that off camera, and then I'll show you what to do once you get to this last one and how you're going to join it at the end. I'm coming now to the end of my last row, working my final single crochet in the back loop. And then I will have either 1 or 2 stitches left, just depending on what I may have at the bottom. It doesn't really matter what you have, as long as in the end you just end by slip stitching into whatever remaining stitches there are. Because once you do that, the next thing you're going to do is seam this together. So we've got the very first row. We're going to have all those chains that were from the beginning chain that we started. And then the row we just completed, we have all of these single crochets. So then what you do is you turn it to where the right sides are facing. So the right sides of our work are going to face each other. And we're going to turn. And what I like to do is go ahead and just do an extra chain one just to secure the stitch. And right after that, you're going to line up basically stitch for stitch. So there should be however many stitches you did for your rib. So in my case, it's 12. So there's going to be 12 joining slip stitches that I'm going to do to put this together. So to do that, what you do is you find your first stitch. So I'm going to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's this one. And you're going to just stick your hook into that stitch like you would if you were normally working a single crochet. And then I'll find the 12th stitch or 12th loop here. Get that up. Okay, so I've got about like, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 12. And then I'll stick my hook into that loop. So now that I have my hook through both loops, the first stitch of the last round I did and the free chain of the first row that I did, and then we're just going to yarn over and pull through both of those stitches and the loop on our hook. And we can make this fairly tight because we're not going to be working back into these stitches, and this will make it a very nice secure seam. So once I've done that, that's one join. I'm now going to go into the next stitch and insert, and then find the next free chain loop here and insert, yarn over and slip stitch. And that will be the second joining. And then I just do that all the way down until I get to the very end. So then I just go number 3, 4, and And the last one, 12. These might be a little bit tighter, but that's okay. Just kind of shove your hook in there, find that last stitch, and then slip stitch it together. And there we go. And then when you pull open and look at the right side, you can see it's kind of a pretty like nice join. Like it just looks like the ribbing continues in pattern. There may be this slight bit of spacing, but it's going to be on the side. It's not even going to be too super noticeable. And then even on the inside, while there is this ridge, it's not much more prominent than any of the other ridges. So it's actually a pretty nice way to easily seam without having to get out a yarn needle or anything like that. The next thing you'll then do is you would just fasten off. I don't have my scissors with me right now, so otherwise I would just do that. And then you would just weave in that tail, securing it back into the ribbing. So once you do that, the bottom of your shirt is now completely done. And now you're ready to go back and work on the sleeves. So that will be the next part that I show you how to do. Once you're finished working the bottom ribbing, you are now ready to go back and work the sleeves. So this is a short sleeve, so it's not going to be a whole lot of length that you're adding, but we are going to be adding a little bit along with this ribbing to kind of pull it back in and make it nice and polished. As you can see, I've already worked one sleeve here. So this is what we are making it look like on the other side. So you'll work this twice. So to do that, what you're going to do is find your sleeve opening. So I still have this side opening marked with these stitches. These were the ones that were skipped when we were working the body, and we started working into these chains that were used to connect the yoke to split for the body and sleeves. So what we're going to be doing is working back into these, but this time working around this sleeve opening in pattern. So to do that, the first thing you'll do is you'll take your yarn. What I like to do to make it more secure is go ahead and just do a slip knot. Which I'm for some reason just having trouble with there. Okay, there we go, slip knot. And then we're going to find our underarm chain here. So your underarm chain will be whatever even number it tells you to do. For me, it was, I believe, 6. So I'm going to find those 6 chains. So it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I guess, I think maybe. I don't know. Really, honestly, as long as you can just find a center spot here, that's where the center is. Move to the left of that, and you're just going to insert your hook into that chain. Now notice I didn't insert it into the actual stitch that was right here because that was the body stitch. We're going to add stitches to here. If you accidentally do that, it's really not that big of a deal. It's in the underarm. Who's going to see it? No one. Only you will know it's there. No one else is going to really care. So you can join it however you want to, honestly. Now here we go. So I'm going to put the slip knot onto my hook, pull it through to join, and then we're going to chain 1 just to make sure it's nice and secure right there into that chain. And then what we're going to do is work in pattern across this chain. So to do that, we're just going to continue our extended single crochets. So in this case, I'm going to insert into the same chain we just joined, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through just the first loop to extend it, yarn over, pull it through 2 to finish it out. And then because I know that I was supposed to have 6, I'll go ahead and work 2 more. So that'll give me a total of 3. So there's a second one. And a third one. So let's see, that'll be, I think, maybe this one right here. We'll just say it is. There we go. Third chain, probably just like right there. And why am I fighting it? We'll just go ahead and put it in that kind of that space that's right there. There we go. That works. So an extended single crochet. And then one thing I would recommend is going ahead and marking the first stitch of the round, just so that way you can find it more easily later. There we go. Okay, that was our very first stitch. Okay, so now that we've done that, we are about to approach the corner here. So one thing about the corner of any top-down yoke sweater is that it can sometimes create these big gaps and holes to jump from here all the way to the very first stitch. So one thing that's a usually pretty good practice is to do a decrease on this part. Now what I mean by that is that you're going to do a extended single crochet together, so that way you're not changing the stitch count, it's just pinching this all in. So one thing to do is I might find like, okay, so I've got this kind of big gap right here, this kind of big gap here, and then I've got kind of like these strands that are right about here. So what I might do is go ahead and insert my hook through those strands. Oop. Pull up a loop, and then go ahead and pull through, or sorry, not yet, sorry. Once I pull it through there, it kind of pulls these threads in. Then I'm going to go to the next stitch that was marked, which is the first stitch of the sleeve round, insert my hook into there. I can actually take that stitch marker out. Won't need that anymore. Oh my God, why am I struggling today? There we go, okay. And then we will pull up another loop. So we'll have 3 loops on our hook. And just like we do with the extended single crochet decrease, we're gonna yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops to create that extension, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And if we can kind of cinch that together, we can see that it is pulling a lot of these different stitches together into this triangle formation. So then that way it's not just this giant gap inside the corners of our underarms. So now that we've done that, all we have to do now is continue the pattern. So we worked into this stitch, so now we'll work into the next stitch along the sleeve opening and just continue doing extended single crochets. And thankfully, we don't have to do any sort of increasing or decreasing pattern. We don't have to worry about tapering the sleeve because we're not going all the way to the wrist. So whatever stitch count you get here is just going to stay the same. Now, I'm obviously going to be able to continue with this, but I do want to go ahead and show you this next part. So remember that the sleeves had these arrow stitches as a detail. So the arrow stitch pattern is going to continue. So the last time we left off, depending on your size, it could be the point or it could be the setup with these 3 prongs. Whichever one it is for your size, you just do the next one in your cable pattern. And depending on your size, it will tell you to work either 4 or 6 rounds. The reason for that is because whichever one that size ended on, you have to do that many rounds to get to finish on a point. We always want to make sure we finish our sleeve on a point so that way it doesn't look like it's unfinished. So continue to do that. We're going to go ahead and work around. I've already shown you how to do this arrow stitch, so you should know how to do that by now. But I'll go ahead and work around to the other corner and show you what to do over here and then how to join at the beginning. So go ahead and work that off camera and meet you back. I'm coming now to where I'm about to see my other stitch marker, which means I'm about to reach the corner. So what we'll do is we will go ahead and work our final extended single crochet into that marked stitch. So I can actually go ahead and take that out. There we go. Just work an extended single crochet. And then notice it looks like there's another stitch here, but remember that was the stitch that was part of where the chain was used to join for the body. But what we're going to do is we do want to at least close that up because that is a bit of a gap, as is this big space right here. So we're going to find kind of this little stem right here in the middle. And what I like to do is just kind of stick my hook in that stem, and then, oh, sorry, stick my hook right into that stem, pull up my loop, and then we're going to find our chains. So remember that if whatever number of chains you had it cut in half. So for me, I should have 3 left since I did a chain of 6. So I'm going to count that as 1, 2, 3. So my next chain I need to work in is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this kind of big gap right here, go into this chain space, chain loop, whatever you might want to call it. Pull up my loop. I should now have my 3 loops. We're going to just perform our decrease again. So we're going to pull through just the first 2 to extend, and then through the next 2, and then kind of tighten that up. And we've now filled in a little bit more of that gap. So it's it's no more gapped than any of the other stitches that are around it. And now that I've done that, that counts as one. And then we're going to go into the next one. For me, that's 2. And then my final one is 3. And then what's great about this is that to join into the first stitch, you do it exactly the same as we've been joining any of our other rounds. You're just going to do a reverse slip stitch. So I'll go ahead and insert my hook through the back of the stitch. Sometimes the stitch marker can be used to kind of stretch those up and make it easier to stick our hook through. There we go. And now that it's through, I can go ahead and take this out for the moment. Hook over yarn, pull through. Need to twist it kind of help, pull it through both. And there we have it. We've finished our very first round of our sleeve. So now to do round 2, all we have to do is turn it like we did with the body and the yoke. And then without having to do an extra chain, we are going to find that first extended single crochet, just insert and work another extended single crochet. And then we'll mark that as the first stitch of our round. And then just work an extended single crochet into every stitch around. And then what's great is that because we've already done that decrease, we don't have to do anything more like that because the corner should now be nice and closed up so that when we work our stitches around, there won't be that big gap. And then we just keep doing that around. And then we will do another round, coming back, working in pattern, join, come back around, work in pattern, join. And you just do that for however many times that your size says to do so, whether it be 4 rounds or 6 rounds. And then once you do, you will then be ready to add a little bit of ribbing just to finish up the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up my sleeve off camera, and then I will show you what to do to set up for the ribbing at the end. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and join with my reverse slip stitch into that first stitch and then remove my stitch marker. And actually, I don't even really need that stitch marker anymore because now all I have to do is the ribbing. So to do our ribbing, just like we did at the bottom, what we're going to do is, if you want to have a slightly snugger ribbing, we're going to take out our size 3.5 millimeter hook, and we're going to set it aside and replace it with our size 3.25 millimeter hook, and just insert that here. So the instructions for the ribbing are exactly the same as the instructions for the bottom. The only difference is going to be in the length and also in the tightness at the end. So earlier when I gave those instructions, we had a length that was much, much longer. Well, we don't need that with a short sleeve like this. So we're only going to actually chain 5. Because then that will give us 4 single crochets to work with. So we're going to go into that second chain from the hook and work a single crochet. And then work a single crochet into every chain down. So that's just going to be 2, 3, and 4. Oh, no, I worked into the same one twice. Oops. There we go. All right. Just like on the bottom though, we're still going to be doing the join as you go method. So we're going to find our stitch here on the side, and we're going to work a slip stitch into that first one, and then work a slip stitch into the next one, just to secure it to the side and to match the number of rows. Then we're going to turn, skip those joining slip stitches, and then we will work 4 single crochets in the back loop only. Now in the bottom one, I liked to end with going through both loops of the single crochet just to keep it from being too loose at the bottom. But when it comes to these sleeves, I don't necessarily want it squeezing my arm a lot, at all. So I just want the ribbing just to hug my arm. So instead of working through both loops, on the sleeve ribbing, I go ahead and just work through the back loop like I do the others. That way it gives me a little bit more of a relaxed rib. I'm not feeling like it's cutting off the circulation in my arm or anything like that. And it still looks pretty good. I'll still go ahead and forego any of these turning chains. So when I turn, rather than chain one, I go ahead and just go directly into the back loop. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through two, and that creates my first single crochet through the back loop. And then I work it into the next three. And there we go. And then find the one I haven't joined into. So that's the one we joined into earlier. So we're going to go to the next one and work slip stitch and slip stitch. And then you just repeat that just like with the body, but this time all the way around the sleeve. And then when you get back to the beginning, you're going to join it exactly the same way as you did the body. So I'm not going to show that on camera just because I've already shown those instructions essentially elsewhere. So if you need a refresher on how to do that, you can always go back to the bottom ribbing instructions, the hem instructions, and be able to see how you join that. So I'm going to continue working the rest of this ribbing for my sleeve off camera, and then I will join you for the final part of this shirt pattern, and that is the finishing touches. The final step to finishing up your lavender chamomile tea is the finishing touches, and the one main thing is attaching your fasteners. So for me, I just bought these two-piece set of 1.5-inch toggles, just because that's the style I'm really wanting to go for on this. But really any 1-inch buttons or any buttons that you think look good and will fit through your buttonholes will do just fine. So you can purchase these. I'll have a link for them in the description box below. I just got these from Michael's, like I said earlier in the video, but you can buy them really from anywhere that sells buttons. So I'm gonna go ahead and detach this first one. Okay. And we're going to see if we line up the buttonholes here, we can see that it's supposed to go right about here. So usually I kind of like lift up and I'm like, okay, so that kind of matches with the ridging of the ribbing. So you can see that it's supposed to go in between here. So then what I do is I go ahead and take my yarn needle. And I'm just going to kind of jab it right in there just to mark my spot. And then what I can do is I can take a length of yarn, just enough so then that way I can secure it nicely. So maybe about that much there. Thread that through. All right. And then we're going to go through our first hole of our button or toggle, then through here and make sure I match where it's going to go here. Oh, came out. Promise I am very competent at doing this. There we go. All right. Okay. Now that that's pulled through, we should have both strands on on the one side. Yes, there we go. That's just the tail from earlier. Okay. So now that we have our toggle threaded through with our yarn, we're going to take our yarn and we are just going to tighten it into a nice secure knot. Now you don't need to tug like so hard that you end up breaking the yarn, but definitely give it a nice snug little pull there. And then I go ahead and double knot it. Okay. And then from there, kind of just check to see if whether or not it's too loose, too tight or anything, and you can adjust as needed. To me, I feel like this is, just fine. And then maybe, I don't know, we'll do maybe just one more triple knot just to really be sure. Because, I'm paranoid like that. I'm always like, oh, no, it's never going to be enough. Everything's just going to fall apart. Okay. So then once you do that, one thing I like to do is go ahead and take my tapestry needle here and just weave in the loose ends just a little bit through this ribbing. So I'll just kind of go. All right, so my battery died in the middle of explaining all that, but I'm sure you basically get the idea. You sew it on, weave in your yarn ends, and then you've got your buttons and toggles in there. One thing to make sure you do is to test to see, will they go through the buttonholes, and mine go through just fine. And oh, look at that. They just look so good. All right. So now that I've done that, all I have to do is go back through and find all my other loose ends, just weave through those. And then you're ready to launder and potentially block it to measurements if needed. But other than that, you are completely done with your lavender chamomile tea. So go out and enjoy wearing it yourself or gift it to a loved one. Hopefully you found this tutorial really helpful. If you did, please go ahead and hit like and subscribe for more tutorial videos coming up in the future. Thank you very much. Have a great day.